RCI's IMSA Championship Season 2 continues for our second visit to Sebring International Raceway. When we were here one season ago, it was a torrential downpour for much of the race. Today, quite the opposite for the second time around. An absolute baking sunshine in the Florida sun. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Jesse Lee, joined by Sarah Stant with Ash Bibby behind the cameras for this round of the IMSA series. Sarah, welcome back to iRacing and welcome back to Florida.
So glad to be back. This was the first track I ever did a endurance race on. This would have been about 2 or 3 years ago now. I was glad to be here and taking part in that wonderful Ferrari.
That would have been a fantastic ride. Today, maybe not so much. An all-important round 4 of the championship. And the thing that I've heard from most of the teams all week long is the lack of grip. Why is there a lack of grip? Because it is baking out here. The temperatures well up into the high 30s in centigrade and into the 40s for the track temp, and that is not conducive to grip around any racing circuit, let alone this one. We've seen cars sliding out on their own accord. Every driver has said the same thing to us up here in the booth. It just doesn't feel good. This could be a slog here today, Sarah.
Absolutely. We're going to be seeing cars losing so much lateral grip. And on a track like Sebring, where there's very little cambering to really take advantage of, that lateral grip loss is going to punish so many drivers. We see many drivers going to have trouble with the wall we're passing by right now. Let's hope not, though. We want to see a nice clean race where every car gets past the finish line.
Certainly do. Last time we were here, it was a bit of a melee for a lot of the teams. They were struggling with the wet weather. Saw a couple of instant exits via hard hits to the wall. We pray that doesn't happen today. We needed the wet weather tires, and that was brand new to the iRacing simulator at the time. Now, not so much of a mystery, but not a problem here today. Qualifying ongoing. They only have 10 minutes to lay down a fast lap around here, and this is not the shortest track around. I can assure you that. Barmacha, the only car to set a representative time in the GTP category. Benjamin Heilman goes to the top in the LMP2 category, and Hereford Smith slides out. We talked about that just a moment ago. That's going to be a common problem here. Was this a curb a little bit? No, just absolutely losing it because they can't grip the racetrack.
Absolutely, and that loss of that loss of grip is just so catastrophic on a track like this. We're going to see probably the most punishment on the GTPs, I'm assuming. Mostly just because these cars are constantly already pushing so fast through the corners, taking advantage of the cars, really high downforce. Something that maybe the GTDs are less likely to kind of face today, but we'll have to see.
Well, we talked about a week ago about how we thought the GTDs were probably going to fare the best in the conditions, but that's not exactly what happened. The GTDs did struggle at Spa. It was the GTPs that ended up looking just about the best throughout that entire race. I wonder, though, if today it might not be the reverse. The GTDs getting the better bit of it and the prototype struggling with grip. They've got all that downforce, but whenever the car turns and the track is so hot like it is, the tires just slide. They don't grip. They don't bite into the asphalt or the concrete, depending on what part of the circuit you're on, of course. And they just sort of slide you sideways. And that's sort of what we expect to see quite often. And that's just also another issue. Cold tires coming out of the pits. Keep in mind, these teams will have to do a pit stop during the race. Tomas goes to the top in GTP. It's a 44.667. That is a couple of tenths better than Bart Macha and Mikhail Sundstrom behind them there. Daly and Octane, the other couple of qualifiers. Thus far, Heilman over Holland in LMP2. There's 4 LMP2s, one of which has not taken time thus far. And Strutsenko out in the lead in the number 32 BMW and GTD. A 2-minute .898 for them puts them in the provisional spot. They've got about half a second, a little bit more than that, in fact, nearly 6/10 back to Hilden in P2 for GTD pole.
Absolutely shocking to see such a gap between first and second right now. But this late in the season, we start to see a lot of the drivers who maybe don't feel like they can compete for first anymore dropping out. And that gap between the drivers who stick around and the drivers who are in first can sometimes get pretty wide.
Really can, and we've seen a fair share of cars that have struggled throughout this series, several of them still with us, so my hat's off to them for continuing. You've got a couple of part-time cars in the field. I think Tom Roberts rejoins us this week. They weren't there at Spa last week as far as I could remember. I could be wrong about that, though, but I know Tom Roberts is on something of a part-time schedule. Harry Conway is joined us here in the GTD field, and that's a newer sign-up as well. They're trying to get the hang of it. They did not sound particularly confident. Overheard them in the garage area prior to practice today. They didn't seem too confident. I didn't see anything that out there on the racetrack that would tell me that they weren't in control of the car, but I mean, they're P3 right now. That's got to be a little bit of confidence there, now down to fourth, but even still, that you're hanging with them, you got to be happy about that.
I mean, of course. I mean, anytime you can really kind of hang on there and try to do your best is time to be lauded. And I definitely also got to add my props to the drivers who stick around, because at the end of the day, I mean, getting that extra seat time is so valuable. Even if you're in last place, you're seconds behind first, in your class. Just stick around, get that extra seat time, get a chance to see how these drivers who are so much faster actually take the track, and maybe pick up a few of those skills yourself.
100%. You don't get better by watching from the sidelines. You get better by doing. And I would probably argue most people are not necessarily instructional learners, but doing. They learn by doing. And I personally champion that as well. Mikael Sundstrom finding the track completely different than a season ago. And that's the other thing, too. When you come back to repeat tracks, usually you're armed with extra knowledge, extra information on what you need to get the job done. That's not the case here. We're talking about the wet to the mixed racetrack. Everything was new with the rain whenever we were here a season ago. This is the opposite of that. So realistically, despite this being our second visit to Sebring here in Florida, this is the first time they've experienced this track like this, and especially with the heat. So it's almost like they have no notebook. It's like they're here for the first time again.
Exactly, and really, when your only other experience here in this patch might have been during the rain season, getting a chance to take it on in a completely opposite condition. I mean, this ripping hot track it might as well be the rain, just because you're fighting grip in an entirely different way right now. Your tires are going to be degrading so much faster than you might be used to, and might result in a few drivers who think that maybe they don't need to get new tires. Maybe, that they don't could skip these kind of things. There's no way you could skip it on a track like this.
Well, we've seen that mixed strategy before. It's live by the sword, die by the sword, and it's worked that way in both equal measure. I'm quite curious to see who would roll that dice, if any, today, because I reckon you're just about right. Why would you here today? But there's always somebody who thinks that they can stand to benefit. Final few seconds of qualifying ticking away. All flying laps will count. Just a couple of cars out there still on a lap, and now nope, they weren't. Everything was invalid, and qualifying is over. Tomas out qualifies Macha, a 44.499, good enough for pole. That is 4/10, give or take, for the pole position. The number 17 Porsche in third place. Mikael Sundstrom in the Acura, who has been the lone Acura in the series for the last 2 weeks. Not so today. Jordan Daly in fourth, Billy Octane in fifth for the SJ&H cars. Dan Van Zudva, who's been with me in the booth the last couple of weeks, out there on the racetrack here today. Qualified sixth, said in chat, didn't go to plan, could have been top three. So we'll see if they can do something in the number 12. Miguel Martins in the Cadillac, and Ingman in the second Acura in eighth. LMP2, Benjamin Heilman over Holland and Hereford Smith. Ted Edwards in P3 there, a 47.895 for Heilman's pole today. Strutsenko did not relinquish pole position here in GTD, despite a late onslaught, still held on to their pole position, a 2-minute 8.98 over Makhmutov. Hilden in third place, Radiani in fourth, and Stanskitsky in fifth place is your top five in GTD. We're getting through the meat part of the championship season, which means the championship points are getting quite close for some, and for others, it is a championship fight that is getting away from them. Here is how the championship has shaped up in GTP. Mikael Sundstrom has 2 wins to their name and is out in front of the championship, 194 points. 176, Bart Macha in P2. And Jordan Daly has 155 in third place. Billy Octane in fourth with 140. Norbert Tomas with 95 points. And then behind them, Bethier, Martins, Bullwinkle, Ingman, Glenn, DeRitter, and Barusa, your 12 cars in the GTP field. Moving on to the LMP2s, only 4 of them on the grid today, but Benjamin Heilman has also managed 2 wins out of 3 tries. 194, Ashley Holland in second place has 158. Alex Pilbeam, who I did not see here tonight, on 155. Herford Smith's in fourth place with 144. Ted Edwards rounds out your top 5 with 119. Behind them, Camfriger, Leonard, Marciano, Alexi, Chris Cardis, Matthew Malcolm, and Dele in 12th place. And out of the prototypes and into the GTD category is Alexander Strutsenko, leading them with 2 wins to their name as well, 180 points. Over Mac Mutov has 164. Third place, Radiani with 157. And Tikhonov, who I didn't see in the field, doesn't mean they're not there tonight, though. 143 for them. Kupe Sinyov is in 5th place, 137 points. Behind them, Roskim, Koku, Bryant, who is not here today for sure. Mesher Yakov, Hilden, and Shinsky in 11th place. Those cars, some of them are still involved. Some of them have retired. Sarah, completely different ball game here today with the heat. How hard can you afford to race somebody early on, knowing that potentially you don't have the grip and you're putting yourself at risk?
I mean, that's the real kind of conundrum here, is that if you choose to go too long, your tires are going to be absolutely shredded by the heat. But if you choose to race really hard, you're going to be shredded by the heat and shredded by racing really hard. I think the best thing you can do really is race hard at the beginning and hope for the best, because you're not going to get that grip back. That track is taking every little bit out of your tire throughout this entire race. But at the end of the day, we'll see how it goes and hope the best for every driver on the track.
Ash Bibby has resubbed for 8 months on YouTube. He's continued that subscription. Wants an 8th month ooh-woo. I'll give it to you. He's right here with us anyway. He's our broadcaster, but I'll do it anyway. I'm going to get you a clean one, Ash. You ready? You ready? Ooh-woo. There you go. 8 months for Ash Bibby there. And maybe Safari Nation in chat joining us for the race next week. You'd be more than welcome to join us. Of course, mid-season signups are allowed for every single championship, no matter what platform it's on, here on racerci.com. And of course, we'd love to have a couple of more cars on the grid as we head down the straight. Sarah, quickly before we go, predictions for today's race.
No less than 3 crashes. That's my biggest prediction.
No
I hope not. Please prove me wrong out there. Every driver, prove me wrong.
So how many on the first lap then? Is it Calamity Corner?
I think so, honestly. I think we have a lot of drivers coming in with a lot of speed, trying to find that little opening, and it's like 4 drivers try to take 1 exit at the same time, and half of them are on the wrong side of the highway.
Well, let's hope that's not the case, of course, but it is always a possibility. The GTP is getting us underway first. Tomas has started on pole position for, as far as I know, nearly every race, and they've just had unfortunate circumstance after circumstance, disconnected on the last lap of the race 1 week ago. But we are great here for Sebring, round number 4 of IMSA Season 2 on RCI TV. It's a clean getaway from Tomas, and the CLR car slots into P2 with Mikhail Sundstrom in 3rd place. They all end up single file just about, but the lights flashing on the SJ&H car in the background, who seems to have lost a little bit of momentum now, as the LMP2s have made it clear through turn number 1 without any issues. But what about the GTD cars coming through the first turn? I don't see any chaos here. They've just about got single file before they even got to turn 1.
I am so proud of these drivers being able to, oh, I spoke too soon. A little bit of back panel bumping there, but nothing too bad. But I'm so proud these drivers managed to get into a single line like that, able to get through that really difficult corner without a lot of mayhem, without destroying each other's car. Really remembering that at the end of the day, this race is a long one. It is not won in the first 30 seconds.
No, but it sure can be lost. And here's Harry Conway fighting for position. They may have lost a spot there on the initial start as Shinsinski gets by them. And now they're trying to get by, or excuse me, it was Tikhonov, in fact, that got by them. Tikhonov now holds the 6th place position. Conway fought tooth and nail through turns 1 and 2 and nearly got back beside him through Gurney Bend, going the long way. Hard to do that, but by the time they got to Cunningham Corner, they had to get back down to single file. No major issues here. The only touch that we noticed was the one that we caught live between Tikhonov and Conway. But other than that, they've just about gotten away with it here early. And I wonder, Sarah, because of the lack of grip in the heat, if that made them sort of play in a smaller box than they normally would have to.
I'm thinking so, honestly. These drivers are all skilled at this, and they've been doing this for quite a while, and it really shows because they start to do these little things that maybe as new drivers you might not even think to do. You know, playing it safer, getting in line. Oh, we got a little bit of I believe, a replay here. I'll sing it over to you, Jesse.
Well, let's see what happened here to Miguel Martins. He's just losing it there, and that's sort of the pendulum effect here. Whenever the tires are not gripping and biting into the asphalt and concrete, you sort of lose it, and there's no way to gain back control. It's almost like you're on ice at that point, but he saved it as far as I can tell. Miguel did not make it all the way to the wall.
Exactly. And honestly, I've got to give props to the driver there. Skillful recovery of what could have been so much worse. Getting these cars back on the track is so difficult. They have untold amounts of torque. When you're on the gravel, your tires start spinning crazy like. Ooh, took it a little bit too much of the corner there, but managed to make it through the corner. Absolutely no problem. Looks like they're using a Good Smile livery there. Is that Hatsune Miku I see?
It might be the famous Vocaloid that I think she's Japanese, right?
I believe so. I hear she's also the creator of Minecraft.
Oh, yeah. She showed up on a Domino's Pizza once, and I was really confused about that. But, normally I refer to that as an anime, but that's only when I don't know what it is. That is Hatsune Miku, and I do know what that is, for better or for worse. So I assume Tom Roberts has done that quite by design. Maybe they're a fan of the Vocaloid. Could very well be. I don't know if Tom Roberts is the one that owns like a DDR machine or not, but that might also fuel the flames as well. Stretsenko continues to lead in this category GTD, 1 second in front of Hilden in the number 15. Makhmudov right behind them as they're all single file, and that was such a procession-like start to this race. Really the only one fight that we saw sort of outside the top 5. Everybody else was able to get single file and drive away. Tomas in the GTP field has done a great job of escaping. They've done that pretty much every race thus far. 3 seconds in front of Bart Macha now in only a couple of laps. That is humongous pace by Tomas in that Porsche.
I mean, absolutely. Look at that, the speed compared to some of the other drivers. Just really sending it down the track today.
A 45.036 for Tomas versus Bart Macha's 46 flat. We're right on board with Mikael Sundstrom, the helmet camera. This is pretty much what he sees as he drives around here. The nearly on pace Acura hunting down the Connection Lost Racing Cadillac of Macha in front. This is a classic battle. We've seen that here, right here on RCI TV for the past 4 years or so. Very common fight, just in a completely different sim. I sort of grin every time I see it. Some battles just never really die, and these two, certainly that is the case. Sundstrom a little bit quicker than Macha right now. We'll see as they cross the line here if there's any difference. Well, Macha ran a 46.3, Sundstrom ran a 46.1, so Sundstrom still quicker there, catching P2, and that's all that's doing is helping Tomas in front, who continues to build on that lead.
Building on that lead, really, when you're fighting, sorry, give me a second. building on that lead is so important early on. It's like I was talking about earlier. With these cars and in this temperature, these tires are going to be absolutely gone by the 20-minute mark. These drivers are going to be so pushing gently near the end that really the only time to make any sort of chance at a good push is going to be right now.
Well, Kevin Boss has joined us in the YouTube chat and has asked, has there been a send yet? Technically, there has. Harry Conway lost a position on the initial start, sent it on Tikhonov down into turn number 2. It was a minor touch. Nobody got spun around, and they ended up line astern. And, in fact, Conway was back on the attack the very next corner. That pass didn't come off. But other than that, it was a very gentlemanly like start to this race. Nearly everybody in all the classes got single file almost immediately, and we suspect that might have something to do with the lack of grip in the heat. Eric Ingman has retired out of the GTP field. Remember, they were the second Acura. Says great timing, race day and tech issues happening, brake pedal not working properly, so that's going to be a hardware failure and the retirement of that Acura. Not even 10 minutes gone in this race thus far, and the gap for Tomas is 5 seconds in front of Macha, but that's not the fight that Macha's worried about. It's the fight coming up behind them with Mikhail Sundstrom. Benjamin Heilman doing what he typically does in the LMP2 field. Heilman has qualified on pole for the majority of races as of late, has had mixed results recently as well. Sometimes they win, sometimes they have sort of a victim of circumstance, I suppose. It's different things. There's been off-tracks crashes, pit stop strategies that haven't worked out in the past. All these things have compounded, but the typical tale of the race has been the same, that Heilman and Holland, sometimes Herford Smith and Ted Edwards has been up there at times as well. Heilman's never had a too big of a lead in one of these things to begin with.
It really shows that, like, some drivers are incredibly good at what people who are racing would usually call hot lapping. They're really good at just sending around the track when it comes time to quali, but maybe necessarily aren't significantly past their fellow drivers in other forms of racecraft. And some drivers are really bad at that kind of hot lap, but their racecraft is really good. And it's really great when you see stuff like this, though, because that kind of window of difference between the drivers really tightens up once the race starts, especially when you start factoring in you have faster and slower cars around you, so it works out pretty interestingly.
One of my favorite fights was Heilman swapping the lead back and forth at Road Atlanta at the series finale for season 1. It was amazing how many times the lead was swapped back and forth, and looked like they were enjoying themselves. Heilman told us afterwards that, yeah, it was very fun. And that's kind of the point of racing. You get somebody you can trust like that, and you can just sort of have a good race unto yourself. And the added cherry on top, of course, was they're both going for the win. Still a long time before any hardware is handed out today. We showed you the championship points prior to going green tonight. Not a whole lot of separation in a lot of the classes for the championship leaders. What does that mean this late into the season? Well, it means one bad race can undo all of that. And no drop rounds, nothing of the sort here for the iRacing set. So one bad race here, one early exit, one trip to the barrier, Sarah, and then you're back in second, maybe even third place because of how close the racing's been.
Exactly, and honestly, that's not a great feeling when you're really pulling up at first. You push a little too hard in the corner, you hit a barrier, and now you're back in third. You got to fight all the way back through, and it's like this, moments like this where we have a very fast GTP coming up behind a GTP car there, and you know, he managed to dodge out of the way there, but sending it through, trying to get those positions can result in you going to the back of a slower car just because you aren't really able to predict what that driver's going to do.
Right, you are. Most dangerous part of the race, barring the start, of course, is coming through the slower traffic for the first time. You've got to pick them off cleanly. This has not always been an easy task, and considering that the GTD field is actually the biggest of all three categories, it's about where you catch the traffic. The lucky part here for Tomas is he started catching the back part of GTD during the two long straights that make up the back and the front straight here. But now the real problem is going to be that he's into the meat of the field and now back onto the twisty stuff down to the gurney elbow. Something horrible has happened here to Harry Conway, and the two cars got together. That's is that Coupe Sinyov? I think it was. And Harry Conway looked to be just about stuck to each other coming off the final turn off of Sunset onto the pitch straight. Now that I can't explain that. But the about Roscom has DNF. Coupe Sinyov has towed to the pit lane. Harry Conway is still out there on the racetrack, though he has not pitted. But you can see the whole front clip of that Porsche is gone.
I hope it isn't what it looked like there, because that was rough. Seeing
What it looked like?
I mean, it looked like one driver maybe tried to push a little too hard, but for the amount of time he rode that other car into the wall, surely he could have slowed down and pulled off of the other car and prevented that entire incident from happening.
Yeah,
that seemed to be a...
It definitely looked... Oh, yeah, I see what's going on there. So, I don't know if there was a touch prior to that, but the Ferrari on the outside... And I think Conway was trying to give him enough room, but it just wasn't enough. And they sort of get stuck together. Conway gets T-boned, and that sort of pushes him back into the Ferrari. It definitely looked a bit more malicious than that, but on replay, I think what happened is that they just didn't give each other enough room. Conway gets turned, and that further drives the Ferrari into the wall a little bit.
Always hurts to see, but I'm glad there's obviously zero malicious intent in that sort of move. It's like we talked about. This corner is one of the most dangerous on the track. Coming in really, really tight on it, there is a hidden little bump that is so hard to see when you're driving at these sorts of speeds that if you hit it, it upsets the car a little bit. It's so hard to get control back again.
Right, you are. Coupe Sinyov has not retired the car. They did go to the pit lane. Their tow is complete. They're going to service that car, get it back out there. Harry Conway also has not retired, but they did not tow the car back to pit lane. They have continued to drive around, and I would suspect that they're going to have to come into pit lane at some point because it's not worth it to ride around with the damage. Just run the race in reverse now. Of course, the GTDs have to make a pit stop, same as anybody else. You typically like to make that near the end of the race, but right now, I just feel like Conway is into pit lane. Coupe Sinyov, a lap or two down now, is out of the pit lane. It's just an unfortunate coming together. They're racing for space that didn't exist.
Yeah, that's deeply unfortunate, and always, bums you out to see a driver, get involved in an incident that results in a DNF so early into the race. But I think the reason we're seeing the other car stay out during all of this is purely was just try to get as much time as you could before the car just feels undrivable, and at that point, use your fast pit and hope for the best, which, as we saw them just do.
Yeah, that does turn into one of those situations where all you can do is take your medicine and get back out there, and we've seen that work in the favor of some other cars. Remember, flashback to Daytona as the car didn't hit the wall, Mikhail's car didn't hit the wall, but the side-mounted camera did. It went into the tire bundle. Though the 899, nearly on pace, Acura did not actually hit the wall. But flash you back to Daytona Road Course a few rounds ago. Jordan Daly was backwards. He ended up going back to turn 1 from turn 7. He spun the car off into the dirt at one point. Still got a podium out of it. Why? Because the other cars fell off the road later in the race. Daly was able to put together a good enough second half to get all the way back to the podium positions, and that's why you don't give up. That's why you keep going, because you don't know. There's no telling. Strutsenko, Hilton, they're all out there on the same racetrack. They can find themselves in equal despair later on.
Wow, what a choice of words with equal despair.
I think you're making fun of me, but I'm moving on. Benjamin Heilman has not enjoyed a significant lead this entire race, nor has he really in this entire championship. It's not really his style in these LMP2s to just sort of drive away. He kind of holds them there, and we saw that. We saw him hold 45 minutes with just about that sort of gap. And I've just noticed Holland's livery has a Yorkshire tea sponsorship on it, and I'm a Twinings guy myself, you know. Ash Bibby insulted by that revelation that I enjoy a nice Twinings, a
Y'all
breakfast
are
tea.
drinking bagged tea?
Ash Bibby's telling us in our ears, shouting perhaps, that there's only one type of tea, and that's Yorkshire tea. I haven't had Yorkshire tea in a long time, Ash, because all of our tea got dumped into a harbor back before I was born. So that's why we have Twinings here and not Yorkshire. Sarah, you don't have any, you don't have a comment about
I don't
about
drink bagged
Boston.
tea. I drink real tea, thank you.
Can you explain what you mean by that? Meshryakov making a move on Tikhonov here for 6th place. What do you what do you mean by that? Do you drink leaf tea?
I am a loose leaf tea person. I don't drink bagged teas. I honestly prefer Chinese style teas. I like oolongs.
Okay.
I like pu'er. You know, stuff like that.
Okay, that's fair enough. I don't know where you're getting that, but like, where are you picking that up, guy? I wouldn't know. Oh my goodness, a move there.
I mostly prefer light oolongs though, like Tiguanyin. Tiguanyin is Iron Goddess of Mercy. It's a very light oolong, very, very sweet. Don't have to add sugar. I like it.
So when I go to buy tea, it's on a grocery store shelf, right, with all the other teas. How does one procure loose leaf tea?
The internet, or if you have a good like Chinese tea place.
There you go. So you actually go to tea houses. That's very interesting.
I've not been to one in a long time, but I used to buy most of my tea online.
Well, there you have it. Different tea drinkers. You know, we started off season 1 talking about mayonnaise, and we have advanced to tea. We have upset the British broadcaster, who's a Yorkshire tea drinker. And I'm going to further upset him by saying that, you know, a lot of the tea I drink has ice in it. He is threatening to shut down the stream, everyone. He is upset. He's stomping around. And, yeah, yep, tea has ice in it, just like the Boston Harbor did that day.
I'm going to need a citation needed on that one, Jesse.
I think it was the winter. I think that was part of the. I don't think it was the summer. I think it was quite cold when the Boston Tea Party occurred. For those of you that don't know what I'm on about, I'm making light of a situation where pre-American independence, the colonies decided that they were going to dump a shipment of tea in a Boston harbor as a protest for taxation without representation, and it's quite humorous today. It was quite serious back then, but. A bit of a weird one. And did I see Sundstrom disappear off the road there? No, I did not. I thought I saw something I didn't see. I thought I saw the nearly on pace car disappear from existence. It did not occur, and he's very clearly still right there. I will say this about Matcha and Sundstrom. They race each other quite respectfully. They've got all these years of rapport. They're not going to undo that with any ill-fated moves. And Mikhail Sundstrom at this stage, I'm quite happy to say I know the fella, and he's going to just sit there. If Bart makes a mistake, then yeah, Mikhail's going to take it, but he's not going to get up there, pressure him into a mistake, make a mistake himself. He's more than happy just sort of right here, knowing that on a good lap, he's probably a little bit quicker in his Acura, and if Matcha opens up the door, we talk about it. If not, he's more than happy to stay right there within striking distance.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we had an opportunity to piss off just about every country in the world today. Really glad to have that.
Oh man, who do we want to go after next? I can't even make fun of Canada. I love poutine. Poutine's delicious. Cheese curds, are you kidding me?
I still don't understand how Americans have not picked up this dish in the slightest. I've had to go to Memphis to find a passable poutine.
Yeah, it's. I agree with you there. It is hit or miss down here.
I had one place once I went to Oh my goodness, they gave me poutine with shredded cheese. I nearly walked
They
out.
did not. They did not serve you poutine with a shredded. Was it at least like a mozzarella or something?
I don't remember. I was saddened.
That is. They need to be publicly shamed. That is an affront to really good poutine. You just can't really make fun of Canada, really. I mean, there's nothing really to. I mean, especially as an American, I don't really think I have the leg to stand on.
I mean, the city I'm from, we burned down half the city because our hockey team lost. We did it twice, actually.
Yeah, you and Philadelphia might be twins. Philadelphia
Yeah.
will riot regardless. Shout out to Philly.
Oh no, that's Montreal. Montreal will, if they win, they riot. If they lose, they riot. Vancouver only riots when it loses.
I don't know. I mean, when Philly won the Super Bowl a few years ago, Main Street was destroyed.
Amazing.
Philly, a town that loves to party, even when they shouldn't be partying. Back to the race at hand. 38 minutes left to go here. Tomas leading overall in GTP. They've made it through the GTD field without any sort of incident. They'll have to do that at least a couple more times, but the first trip around is always the most dangerous, and I think they've just about navigated that. The only real major drama, of course, was between Conway and who was that they had contact with? Coupe Signov, I think it was. That Ferrari, that's the only real major incident thus far today. Macha and Sundstrom locked in a battle in GTP for P2 for the moment. Benjamin Heilman has been able to put just a little bit of a gap on Holland behind. 1.5 seconds there. That's still the biggest gap they've had all race thus far. As Heilman pulls away ever so slightly. And Strutsenko enjoys a nice lead in GTD, but the battle for P2 in GTD is on. The Hilden Audi just now in front of Makhmudov's Lamborghini, who has sort of shown some decent pace in every round thus far, and in a similar fashion as well, coming up through the podium positions. Kevin Boss, known Dutch man, has also mentioned that in America we call several things Dutch that aren't Dutch. That is correct. I also grew up not understanding that because I knew they weren't Dutch, but I didn't understand why they were called as much. That is a common thing in America. And Ash, do not take Kevin. Don't, you know he doesn't drink Yorkshire tea either. You know that, right? So just like you are by yourself on that Yorkshire tea island. Unless Kevin Boss is going to correct us and say he does drink Yorkshire tea. Of course, there's always one wrong answer to this conversation. Is, I'm a coffee drinker. You're just wrong. For all intents and purposes, of course, we're just joking. We're jesting, as we typically do. Mesher Yakov has towed to the pit lane, and that's why a hard hit into the wall, bang, and the entire rear clip of that car is gone. Mesher, I think, was considering trying to rejoin, and ended up deciding better of it and towed back to pit lane. I was incorrect. Kevin Boss is a Yorkshire tea drinker. Fancy, aren't you? That's all I got to say about that. Another car in GTD's had an incident. We saw this a week ago. We expected GTD to be the most solid platform. That has not been the case for the last 2 weeks in a row. There's been no real major issues in the two prototype classes. It's all taken place in the GTD field. There you go, Ash. You've got an ally in Kevin Boss. I will go to the grave with my Twinings, however. Not a sponsor. Just quite fond of. We're going to make some moves through the GTD field. Here are the GTPs again. We've got the pass done prior to the major twisty part of the racetrack through Gurney's Bend and then Fangio, Cunningham. Collier and Tower, of course. Gets better after that, after you get by Tower Turn. Go through Flying Fortress, named after the famous airplane. Then I believe it's Bishop. And then, of course, it ends with Lamar. And there's a couple of other straights. But quite a diverse amount of quite a diverse catalog of corners around this particular racetrack. It doesn't have any particular rhyme or reason to it, other than a lot of these corners do seem to mimic more famous racetracks. But of course, it being a flat track, of course, has its own characteristics.
I mean, its history as a track that was formerly very similar to kind of a lot of UK-based tracks as an airfield, resulted in these very, very flat, tarmac-heavy sort of tracks. Just so many bumps as over time the track underneath has started to settle, which results in this, as we can see here, what appears to be a camera filmed by a late 90s MTV crew.
MTV Cribs, not a lot of space, no bathroom. Well, technically one bathroom, but we're going to not get into that. Sunset Bend, very difficult in the best of days with all of its bumps, and it was a huge problem in the wet, of course, with the bumps. You already didn't have a lot of traction in the rain on the wet weather tires. It was made even worse by the bumps. I suspected we'd see more issues with that in today's race. We saw it in practice. It bit a couple of cars that tried to go a little bit quicker than they probably reckoned they could have done. But in the race, we've not seen any issue other than the side-by-side issue there. It's mostly been through some of these sections where we've seen some of the issues on and off the curb here, off of the racetrack. Absolutely no grip in Tom Roberts. Good smile, Mercedes. That was a scary moment indeed there, but well held. Able to get it back onto the racetrack, off the course here for Ted Edwards, and back on again.
Ted Edwards here is really showing us his best dirt impressions today. Really, really proud of him for branching out into different forms of racing. Good on him.
Yeah, Ted didn't really have much of in the ways of a good setup that he trusted prior to today's race. He was actually working with your leader, Benjamin Heilman, I overheard, on a setup. Heilman was giving him some setup tips and numbers to put in, maybe for get the tires to hook up a little bit more. Speaking of Heilman, he ran the quickest lap of the LMP2 field the last time through, a 49.107, as he begins to put significant gap on Holland behind. This is an interesting group of cars here. You've got Tom Roberts, who's on a different lap to these cars. Tom Roberts in the Mercedes in front. You've got Mesher Yakov in the Ferrari that you can see, the dark colored Ferrari, and the white hooded Ferrari in the background. That's Coupe Sinyov. Those cars are several laps down, but this is a fight for 9th position in class.
And it's always great to get a chance for us to really, go into these lower sorts of ones here and see these battles for what are maybe not necessarily consequential positions, but these drivers are still pushing just as hard as the drivers who are up at the front, and their battles are just as important.
Yeah, of course, and to them, they know what their plight is in the race. Maybe it didn't go their way, or maybe they just don't have the pace of the setup here today. That'll be rather by the by, and it becomes about, okay, well, obviously beat whoever I can, and if that's for 9th place, then absolutely so be it. And that's what you're seeing here, as Tom Roberts is going to find himself in a very compromised position. 3-1's not going to go. They're going to make contact down into turn number 1. They just about save it, and that could have been a lot worse as they get by Tom Roberts, who's not in this fight. They're a lap or two ahead of these two cars, but a scary moment nonetheless. And in the offing, it looks like Mesher Yakov has lost a spot here to Coupe Sinyov. Coupe Sinyov in the number 13 Ferrari has taken that spot now.
What a lot of door-to-door and, I guess, door-into-door racing going on here, but these drivers are thirsty for their position, and they have no interest in letting this faster car by. Their battle to them is definitely coming first, and I really can't blame them.
I think that's Callum Kerrigan. Let me make sure it is correct. It is Callum Kerrigan joined us in chat. I mentioned the Flying Fortress, which is the name of a strait here after Tower and before Bishop's Bend. There's a strait called the Flying Fortress Strait. It's a small one, but of course named after the aircraft. Aircraft enjoyer there, old military plane. I believe at some point they may have been stationed around here back in the old days when the world was black and white.
That is a absolutely great question. We'll have to throw that one back to our racetrack historians, also known as I will look that up on Google in between you talking.
Yeah, I was gonna do a joke. I was gonna ask Ash since he was born right around that time, but moving right along, I think I've upset Ash Bibby enough for one day. We will continue on, and just like this fight, Kupe Sinyov may have taken that spot from Mesher Yakov, but he hasn't been able to get away, has he? As they're going to be really close, right into the bumper, just about there. As Kupe Sinyov now under attack, he's going to squeeze Mesher Yakov to the outside of the racetrack here for turn number one. Did they touch? Too close to call, but they're side by side into one again. And here he comes around the long way. He's still there. No, he gets back in line, looking down to the inside. Last of the late breakers, and he's there. Mesher Yakov back into ninth place over Kupe Sinyov. Now that was very close quarters racing there. Not a lot of quarter given, but none really asked, as Mesher Yakov gets ninth place back one lap later. Kupe Sinyov hits the dirt on the exit of Gurney Bend and loses a little bit of time. Now the question remains, will he have the ability to get back up there and fight for him? He definitely has closed up on him under the braking zone, but time will tell. But this battle for ninth will continue. Ash, I apologize. I had to do it. Kevin Boss is asking if I found the little surprise. For lore reasons, let me explain. Kevin Boss has hid something on his GT2 Audi since season start. That coming live on RCI TV tomorrow, of course, the ACC GT2 Championship continuing. And you ask me every week, does Boss, have I found the little surprise? I have not seen it. I looked for it last week and did not find it. And it's quite easy. I could just cheat and look at the car. That's not the point, as it gets real close here. That's not the point, though. I would much prefer to find it naturally. I think that would be a lot more funny for everybody concerned there. Harry Conway nearly had an incident with the race leader right there, but Tom Roberts now has caught up to the back of the number 28 SJ&H Porsche. Very nearly thought about having a look right there.
Sure looked like it, absolutely. These drivers are doing quite the opposite of what you would really expect at this point. They are getting right up against each other when they're at a point in this track when their grip, their cars overall are not going to have the best time, and they're putting them all themselves into very risky positions. And as you can see, we actually have a car that was on tow and now DNF there.
Kupe Sinyov chasing Mesher Yakov here. And this is just a retirement. That is just a retirement. There was no incident there. They were following closely behind their rival and all of a sudden parked the car on the side of the track and have retired. We hope all's well in the number 13's world, because that was very peculiar indeed.
Absolutely. Hopefully they just pulled off, got themselves some Burger King, enjoyed, a little bit of a relaxation point before they consider the next race.
I'm really annoyed of all the free shout outs we give to everybody. Yorkshire Tea, Twinings, Hellman's Mayonnaise. Somebody call us. We'll put it on a huge sticker on the screen. Ash will be more than happy to flash that up for us. Especially if could you imagine if Yorkshire Tea sponsored us? How happy Ash Bibby would be. That would be absolutely beside himself.
Just to add on to all of this, Ash just asked us what color this car is, and the answer is Baja Blast.
He really is. Oh, that is such a good answer. It is Baja Blast.
Yeah, no, well, this is straight up Baja Blast right here.
Well, the problem with this car is it's two-tone. Heilman said that he gave us the lore behind this car. He said that he set this up a very long time ago for a race that he was doing with somebody else, I believe, and he just never changed it. And it's two-tone green, but I like Sarah's answer better. That is Baja Blast, which is another sponsorship we don't have.
Feel like we're gonna have to get Ash Bibi to have a little bleep button every time we mention an unapproved brand on stream.
Boss has just told me that I'm gonna have to wait an additional week to have another look at the wheelie slow Audi, because they will not be in the race this Friday. So that is very interesting. Like I said, I could look that car up, but that's not the point. The point is I want to see it in earnest. I am quite scared that whatever it is hidden on that car I haven't seen yet. The last time he did something like this, he had my face on the car making a kawaii face, and I was not okay with that at all. That was very, very, very well done art. But also, just, you shouldn't subject people to such things. Benjamin Heilman continuing their great work of 48.719 out in front of the LMP2 field. A humongous gap now as Hereford Smith has overtaken Holland, because Holland has done their pit stop today. So did Ted Edwards on the same lap, even lap 16 down pit lane. Matcha, Sundstrom, Daly, and Octane have all pitted out of GTP. Tomas, your race leader, has just come down pit lane and is out with no issues. And that has handed over the lead of the race to Dan Van Zutphen in the number 12 Porsche. It's his first race anyway in this series, and he's leading the race. Dan, I'm gonna do you a soundbite so you can put this on your website. And Dan Van Zutphen in the lead of the race here in RCI. That's a soundbite. You can put that on there. He is leading. Of course, he still has to do his pit stop. The same goes for Miguel Martins, who's 13.5 seconds in the rears of Dan, leading this race. Said that he had potentially a top 3 car, Sarah. Doesn't look too bad out there in comparison to the others. Might be able to make up some time with the pit stop as well.
Absolutely. I mean, anything can happen in this race. We see some differing pit strategies across the board, and let's see how it works out. And, it's really important that us as a group remember the person who said he was going to get a win today.
Yeah, Dan did say that. He said straight up that he is going to win this race today. He was the best car, and there was no way he lost it. He's in the lead now. We'll see if that sticks. Of course, Tomas is only about 20 seconds behind, and the pit stop delta is a wee bit more than 20 or so seconds. So Dan even said that he would sell his sim rig if he didn't win here today. I thought that was insane, but he said it. Oh, huge slide here. Almost contact there as well, but heads up driving as Ted Edwards slides off the track. And I wonder, was that Daly who was sneaking their way through? But Ted Edwards with a little bit of a slide in one of the troubled corners that we've seen thus far. And that's more like it as the tires. I don't know if they're changing tires or not, or maybe that was cold tires that would have further exacerbated that. But just loses control there.
That it's basically like we've been talking about this whole time. That lateral grip is so important to these cars. It's balancing out the really huge kind of down the straight arrow these cars have. And if you're driving on tires that are, slicker than can be with no grip, it's what's going to happen.
It really is. That was Bart Macha in the CLR car that went through, not one of the SJ&H cars, as I previously thought. They look similar from the rear because they're both sort of bluish, but nope, that was absolutely the connection loss car who squeaked their way through there with Sundstrom in tow. That gap's opened up just a little bit after the pit stop. Macho was down the pit lane first. Sundstrom came a few laps later. The gap that was almost non-existent is now 3 seconds, as nearly on pace as Mikael Sundstrom has a little bit of work here left to do. Top 2 cars, GTP still left to pit. Everyone in LMP2 has pitted, including Benjamin Heilman, who is on their outlap, still out in the lead. 13 or so seconds it's reading currently. We'll see if that's valid when they make their way back around, but I suspect it is. 13 seconds the gap. Strutsenko, Hilden, Makhmudov, Radiani, Tikhonov have not done their stop in GTD. That's not uncommon for these GTDs to wait till almost the last moment to do their stops, though.
It's really interesting to see such different strategies. Some drivers really favoring that early pit stop, get it out of the way, and then just focus on the race ahead of them. And some drivers really want to stretch it out as long as humanly possible. We're seeing that a lot in the GTD field right now, and it should be interesting to see how that kind of affects the race overall, because you're going to have these GTD cars losing grip over time, and you're going to have these much faster, grippier prototype cars coming out of the pits with fresh tires that are now kind of having to deal with, instead of everybody being on the same level in terms of grip, they're now going to be battling through drivers that have a very different kind of range of grips.
That's the other thing, too, is when you come up on another car, whether you're battling it for position in class, they're off laps in your class, or it's a completely different class, when you're coming up on them, and if you're in a GTP, you're doing that quite quickly, you have to sort of judge what their grip level is, what their confidence level is in the car as well, and if you misjudge that or misrepresent that, that can create a little bit of an issue, and that's kind of exactly what's happening here with Radiani's getting passed by one of the prototypes, and you sort of have to judge what you're seeing, as Holland does go back through and thought about going up the inside there and thought better of it at the last possible second through the Fangio chicane, realizing that, okay, it's not worth it here, I'll back off, let them get clear, and then I'll telegraph what I'm doing. And that's kind of your point, Sarah. You make a lot of those decisions in the race, and it's never more apparent now. If you try to overtake somebody on the outside and they slide out, that's race over.
Exactly. It can feel really, really bad to have one of those moments, and something that a lot of drivers, or people who maybe don't drive a lot, or they're fresh, or they're just people who enjoy watching this kind of racing, none of this stuff is done consciously. This is all just endless muscle memory learned, and you just kind of hope for the best as your subconscious kind of just takes over while you just focus on trying to get the car around the track.
You can go down into a corner, and anybody who's ever driven knows this 100 times. One of those times the car won't grip. What'd you do different? You really didn't. It just, maybe you were a couple of millimeters off of your normal line. Maybe there just wasn't a grip there. Maybe the tires are giving up a little bit more than you had previously expected. And then all of a sudden you're in trouble. Speaking of, Miguel Martins here is definitely trying to stave off Tomas. Didn't give over. This is for position, of course. Miguel Martin still has a pit stop left to give. Tomas, who's led much of this race, qualified on pole. They've already done their stop, but for all intents, this is a race for position. But down the inside now, and trying to stave him off again. There's going to be contact here. That's going to almost turn Miguel Martins, and away is Tomas going to go after a huge wiggle and a save. Miguel Martins is not going to be too happy about that, but Tomas will probably argue, hey, you're on a different strategy. You were holding me up. What did you expect? I have to get by. That actually furthered the lead that Dan Van Zutphen had. That was 13 or so seconds. It's up to 17 and a half now.
If he keeps up this sort of really fast pushing, he might actually manage to push himself far enough forward through that open air to survive in first place with that pit stop. And if he can if he can manage that, he will definitely not be selling that Sebring and deleting all of his social media.
Yeah, I was gonna say he better win this race, otherwise it'll be the last race he ever runs by virtue of having to sell his sim racing equipment. Zutphen in the pit lane now has decided this is the absolute correct time to come in. I agree with the Dutch driver because he had the biggest gap he had ever had. I don't think he holds on to the lead or second place here, but he might hold on to third. It was about 30, 40 seconds the gap back to third. That's going to be quite close indeed. And if he has a really good pit stop, he might just do it. Tomas back into the lead of GTP. That's where he spent the majority of the race. Got a little sketchy there on the previous lap with Miguel Martins, but All that said, no cars backwards as they continue to race here a little bit further back, and the pass happens here. This should inevitably be for potentially P number 2. Right now it isn't. Of course, Miguel Martin still has to pit. Mikhail Sundstrom making the move down into turn 1. That would have been set up all the way back into Sunset, of course. Looked like Macha was either off the apex or maybe Sundstrom just got a better run down the pit straight. But looks like Sundstrom up to P2 because this car, Miguel Martins, has had a spin.
And it's just going to be continuing on. The more we see these cars driving without those fresh tires, the more you're going to see these cars starting to have their back end slide out like that, and which only compounds the problem further because now the car has less grip on the rear, which means it's going to spin out again.
Yeah, we saw that a lot in the wet in that particular corner. That's down there in Hairpin. And we saw that a lot in the wet with cars locking up and spinning out. We haven't seen that a lot today, but as these tires continue to age, I worry that it will become a far more common thing. Fight now, potentially back on for Mikhail Sundstrom and Bart Macha. Bart Macha may have gotten past, but he's not given up. As this looks like Sundstrom's Acura disappearing off into the literal sunset, going into sunset, but still within just about 1 second's time. Miguel Martin's the only GTP to have not pitted. In fact, they are in this time. That will hand second place over to Mikhail Sundstrom. Dan Van Zutphen did not have a good enough pit stop to bother the top 3. They should, though, get up into 4th. Here is Zutphen coming around Sunset Corner and down the pit straight. Surely Miguel's time is not going to be anything that keeps him out of the top 5 here. And in fact, there he is up into 5th. Jordan Daly up to 4th now.
He's got a long way to go to get back up to 1st, but here at RCI, we believe in you, Dan.
I don't. But anyway, Jordan Daly up into 4th. I'm just kidding. The reason we're joking about Dan, by the way, if you don't know, he's our coworker, and we always give our coworkers a harder time around here than others. I've even sort of had Benjamin Heilman do interviews at certain points, and I don't think he particularly enjoys them. But I mean, come on, anytime I can get him on the mic, I'm going to do it. Daly, though, is 3.5 seconds in front of Don right now, and that's not a particularly wide gap. One slip up from Daly, and the fight for P4 will well and truly be on here late in the going. 11.5 minutes left of the race.
We were having a little bit of focus on that Yorkshire tea car again. Obviously, nothing to do with the sort of tea that our broadcaster drinks.
Do you think he's like, oh, I'm gonna have a tea after this. I'm gonna have a Yorkshire tea after this. Oh my goodness, he's already, folks. Ash Bibby, our broadcaster, has already put in an order for a tea, and he is going to have that. Nope, that's not going to happen. I respect women. Absolutely not. You've said this before on a broadcast. Ash refers to his partner by pet names, and I refuse. I just will not do that. But Hereford Smith in 3rd place, 3.2 behind Holland. We're just going to take this VOD down, right? We're not even going to leave this up.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, my goodness. Dan, off the track there a little bit. Saw that out of the corner of my eye, but they were able to drive back on. No harm, no foul. And maybe now there's been a harm and a foul because they've lost a ton of time, as I believe the number 12 has lost it in a more serious manner. They were only 3.5 seconds behind Daly. They're now nearly 9, but that gap does come down just a little bit.
As somebody who has also probably driven this track, Jesse, how do you feel about VR down Sunset?
Well, I love it when I'm not doing it. I think it's the thing. Certain sims portray that a little bit more aggressively than others, and it's always a bit of a problem. Sometimes it's like looking directly into a flashbang, and that's no good. AMS2 does a really, really like exaggerated job with bloom. a lot of the time, and that can be very difficult. In iRacing, when you're looking at it head on, it's very, very blinding. I can't imagine that feels very good in the eyeballs in VR.
Absolutely not, especially when it's late in the evening here. And, off the track there, but it looks like he's managed to keep control of the car and bring it back onto the track and get into the right position to finish this corner, or also go off track there too as well. Hopefully Dan can get control of the car again and start bringing it back into the racing line.
Oh, he's not gonna. He's gonna have a huge spin here into sunset. He's gonna very lightly tap the concrete barrier on the extreme left-hand side of the racetrack. The tires on that car are absolutely gone. They have to be. He comes in wide, tries to cut it back with too much speed. You can't do that, and he's gonna very lightly tap the wall. That will be some damage, but not enough to knock the rear wing off. But it has gone from a race that could have ended with some promise into a frustrating one for Dan. And all jokes aside, this is sort of what he expected. He was not particularly confident coming into today's event.
Absolutely not. Now, really, for him, his goal needs to be keeping the car ahead of Billy Octane. If he really wants to hold on to that 5th place position, he's definitely going to have to put the effort in, because there may only be a small amount, but any sort of small amount of aero damage to these vehicles really affects its top end speed down sunset.
Kevin Boss, a couple of tidbits of information from him, says the BMW GTP was absolutely horrible in the wet, and also says rip Dan's sim racing career. Oh dear.
Well, hopefully he can sell it and get something a bit better. Yeah, that's the one we're gonna go with.
Well, if he's looking for great sim racing hardware, I would suggest digitalmotorsport.com as your one-stop shop for everything sim racing. It doesn't matter if you're looking just for a new rim, a whole new rig, or of course a base or pedals. They have you covered. All the top equipment from all the top brands in one spot, digitalmotorsport.com. And while you're there, check out their sim rig builder. It is very interesting. You can build the sim rig of your budget or your dreams right there on the website. Get all the stuff in one go. digitalmotorsport.com.
So glad to have such amazing, dedicated sponsors here at RCI with such great products that all of our viewers can enjoy.
Yeah, love our partners, of course, and of course, Fanatec. If he was looking to replace his wheel and pedals, we recommend, of course, Fanatec. You can check out all of their deals and bundles over at fanatec.com. Another incident here for Dan Van Zutphen. Oh, man, yeah, he's going to back it into turn one wall this time, and bang, there goes the whole rear wing, and that's going to require a tow for the number 12 Porsche, and the Dutch driver sitting in the pit lane. You know, not necessarily helpful on iRacing, but had he been doing some ACC racing, he could have been using a Go setup. I'm pretty sure that could have been prevented. They offer esports setups and safer alternatives that anybody can drive. Check out GoSetups.com. Final 5.5 minutes left of today's race. Just a reminder that we like having fun a little bit on the broadcast, so please understand that everything we say, of course, we say with love and care, unless you're a Yorkshire tea drinker, and then in which case I don't know what to say for you. Final 5.5 though, and it has been a race sort of unlike any other that we've seen in this series thus far. There's not been a lot in the way of incidents. A couple of big ones have taken out some of the cars, but largely we have seen some interesting racing amongst the podium positions in at least GTP and GTD thus far. Of course, while we enter the final stage of today's race, we, of course, invite you to check out some of our other partners, Driver 61. If you want to not back the car into the wall hard 2 or 3 times in a row, we suggest you check out driver61.com. They own one-on-one driver coaching and full-on racing schools to help you stay out of the tire barrier. And check them out. And of course, big thank you to AK Esports for more on how they can help you with your esports competition and management. akesports.it.
Are those two of the same cars we're seeing there, or am I needing to put my glasses on?
No. Well, I mean, technically yes, but also no at the same time. We're watching Hereford Smith race their teammate. At least they're a teammate now. And of course, the Yorkshire T cars are racing each other at the end of the race. And this is for P2. Hereford Smith was in front of Holland after the pit stop, and now they've fully come all the way back. And Hereford Smith looking for P2 again. And they're going to have to get a shake on here because we've only got about 3 laps of this race left to go. Not really panic mode yet. Kind of hoping to use some GTD traffic as a pick maybe and hope that they get sent offline a little bit to get up in there. But this is for P2. This is for good points. And remember how close some of these LMP2 points were coming into today. This could be huge later on down the stretch.
Absolutely. And when it comes to a field as small as the LMP one, every position matters. Battling till that last second between each other is definitely what we're going to be seeing pretty much till the end for the last 2 minutes and 48 seconds of this race.
Oh my goodness. Just reading some of the things from chat. You all are very, very funny. And thank you all for hanging out with us today, rolling with the jokes and the punches, of course. And we hope that you've enjoyed today's broadcast. Do bear in mind, normal service resumed tomorrow. The ACC GT2 Championship continues. That'll be live in full tomorrow. Still time to sign up for that if you want to get involved mid-season. You can do that with any of our championships, racerci.com, RCI.com. And of course, this Saturday, as it currently stands, it's the 12-hour of the Nürburgring Nordschleife, the N24 variant of that race. And still time to sign up for that as well. And you pretty much have your pick. You can have any class you like on Saturday.
That'll be a real exciting race this Saturday. Hope to see you all out there having fun. If you're not able to join us for the race, make sure you join us for the broadcast. Anytime you get to see that track, I think is an absolute treat. Probably one of my favorites in racing altogether.
Well, we talk about a race of attrition, and we've seen that here in iRacing, but you'll see a lot of that in the ACC race this Saturday at the Nordschleife, because when you wreck there, you don't ever have a small accident. And speaking of small accident, Macha still trying to pursue Sundstrom. Well, it's come undone as they slide backwards like a couple of other competitors in their class have done. But problem with having a crash at the Nordschleife, like what we'll likely see Saturday, is if you crash in sector like 2 or 3, well, you've got what, 7-8 miles or more to get all the way back around to pit the car and fix it. Of course, you could always tow the car, but I can't imagine that would be very helpful at all. Tomas is going to come to the white flag, which in America means 1 lap to go. And it is a masterclass of a job here for Tomas today. Now, I will say he's got to make it all the way back around, and I'm not being cruel to the driver. I'm merely saying 1 week ago he took the white flag as well, but disconnected as he made his way around, and that awarded the win to Mikael Sundstrom. I'm sitting here, and I've got all my fingers and toes crossed. I don't want that to happen to that gentleman a second week in a row.
That would just be absolutely soul-crushing. Just beyond belief how awful that would feel. I mean, we've all been in a race where we've been doing really good, and be it our computer or our wheels or the internet craps out, and it's just never a great time. Never, ever a great time to have those moments.
Nope, it is the worst. I think if you do sim racing long enough, you run the gamut of things that could possibly happen. And unfortunately, disconnecting is one of them. I've been asked before, what's worse, disconnecting on the first lap or the last lap? I think it's the last lap, right? Disconnecting on the last lap is worse because you've already done all the work, you've put in the time, and to not get any sort of satisfaction or reward for that is horrible. You do it on the first lap, you lost all your practice time, but at least it's happened before you ever made progress. But it looks like he's going to make it around. Tomas is going to get the win today. One more turn left to go. Sunset Bend, and then it's home to the checkered flag. And he's going to go really wide out here. A huge arc into the final turn. And here he comes, Tomas, your pole sitter. He's dominated a lot of the races, and today he's dominated and won at Sebring.
Absolutely fantastic drive today, managing to keep ahead of the other drivers and really just show that he really deserves the win, especially coming off of that disconnect from last race. Congratulations to him.
Mikhail Sundstrom gets a P2, continuing their excellent drive for a championship for nearly on pace. Bart Macha recovers for Connection Lost Racing to get home in third. Daly will have a rather uneventful race in P4. Billy Octane, who was down in 7th place early on, has rebounded for a top 5 for the second SJ&H car. Miguel Martin's right behind him just a little bit, though, but I think time is going to run out. Benjamin Heilman has won it in LMP2 over Holland and Hereford Smith. 2/10 of a second was the gap between Holland and Hereford at the line. Very close race there between those two. Strutsenko, the timing and scoring glitched right there, but Strutsenko has won it in GTD over Hilden, and Radiani is promoted up into P3. Makhmudov and Shansky, your top 5 in that category. Tikhonov, Roberts, Meshryakov, Conway, Kupesenyov, and Roscom, the other cars in that category.
Doing a little bit of a celebratory weave there. I mean, anytime you finish a long race at Sebring is definitely a moment for celebration. Just getting through this track is a victory in itself.
Peter Rush, I think, commending me on my my shameless plugs there. I do appreciate that. Miguel Martin's commenting on the race that it was a rough one out there, or a hard one, that, as he said. Surprised to be close to Billy at the end there. We do already have Dan Van Zutphen, who's with us, who unfortunately has retired from sim racing, Dan.
Well, not retired from sim racing, but I did retire from the race, sadly. To correct you there, Jesse, it's not an issue with my setup. See, I don't think you guys catched it, but I lost the rear almost a few laps earlier, 2 laps earlier. Then your tires are getting hot and hotter and hotter, and well, especially in the last and in the first corner, if you need to use those rear tires and they overheat, then it's really easy to spin. And well, it didn't really make my life easier. I changed tires as well. Oh, I didn't change tires. I went for an alternative strategy, and well, it really was my first actual iRacing league race. I've never really done a league race.
No kidding.
In the GTPs in 1 hour format, and I didn't really have a clue how iRacing pit stops would behave in such short format. You know, you have endurance races, which is just, well, fuel your tank to the maximum and go. But you know, it's not a 1 hour race, and I think Daly went half-half. Which was the correct strategy, and so I didn't change tires, which caused me to, well, crash at the end. Very unfortunate, but I do see potential for future races.
Well, there you have it. And let me correct you. Sounds like a skill issue to me. Sarah Stant?
Absolutely. It's really important to remember to not have skill issues on the track and check out Go Setups.
Yes, I'm absolutely getting burned as a staff member here at RCI. But yeah,
no, Dan, it looked good. You know, you had the whole bit. You were in the lead, and then like you say, the not changing tires, do you really, all seriousness, do you think that was what led to the issues that you had?
I do think so. Because well, the rear was getting loose even before the pit stop, and I did think about changing tires. In any case, but I was already too far in my stint, I felt, and I was, if I will be ahead of Daly, I can do everything to prevent him from passing me, even with not having the time advantage. And if I don't, I'll just drive safely. Safely I didn't drive. Sadly, it resulted in a crash. I think it's just a combination of both not having the good strategy. Sebring isn't the best track. I think it is definitely one of my worst tracks. So I think in a future race around a track like Le Mans or Imola, I can definitely fight for the top 3 positions, top 2 maybe, but it just wasn't meant to be today.
There you have it, Dan. Thanks for coming and talking to us. Of course, anybody you want to shout out?
Well, to my team, Mexico Racing Team, and the podcasters. Lovely today.
Thank you for lying to us, Dan. But we appreciate you coming and talking to us, and we wish you the very best of luck in the next one. Dan Van Zutphen led a little bit here today. Feels like the undoing was not changing the tire, Sarah. We talked about that early, how important that could be. Who would be willing to roll the dice and not do it? The answer was done.
Absolutely. And I did say that choosing to not run those extra set of tires was going to basically backfire for a lot of drivers, and I was right.
Well, there you have it, folks. The sun's setting here on Central Florida, and it's setting on today's race. All of your championship leaders somehow found a way to gain championship points today. All of them were able to avoid any sort of calamity. You've got Mikael Sundstrom, who didn't win the race. They finished second, but they're not racing Tomas for the championship currently. They're racing Matcha. That gap has continued to increase. Heilman over Holland. That's the battle for the win in that championship as well. Heilman, of course, on top. Strutsenko over Hilden. The very same thing with that group. Strutsenko continuing their great work. Still, though, all these championships are still up for grabs as we enter the final couple of races of the series. One bad race undoes all of that progress, though. Playing with the lead sometimes is the most dangerous thing of all. Sarah Stant, your final thoughts.
All I can say today was congratulations to every driver that even just put tires out on that track. Even just braving Sebring is a challenge in itself, and I'm proud of every one of you out there. And I guess my final word of the day is drink water.
There you go. Absolutely the case. It was a hot one today, and the drivers rose to the occasion in my books, and it was a fantastic race. A lot of podium positions in doubt late in this one. Folks, it's been a pleasure bringing you this race today. Our next broadcast on the channel is tomorrow, the continuation of the ACC GT2 Championship. We'll be live back with you on Saturday as well for the Nürburgring Nordschleife 12-hour event. On behalf of the entire broadcast team, I've been Jesse Lee, joined by Sarah Stant and Ash Bibby behind the camera, somewhat begrudgingly with me here. Thank you all for watching. Have a good night.